Hey folks, good morning. It is 5 a.m., a couple minutes after, and we'll continue reading. So, today we're on Genesis chapter 5, and we've only got 2,000 pages to go. So, we're making progress. We're doing good. Now, before we start, I wanted to just take a second to speak to what we read yesterday with Cain and Abel. And now there's so much more that could be said about this, but one of the things that I didn't mention that I think is really um, insightful and useful to think about, for me at least, is when thinking about Cain and Abel, also thinking about the story of the prodigal son. And in that story, I had always focused on the son that ran away, on the prodigal son, and not on the son who stayed with his father and had been more or less obedient. But Cain and Abel, it's a the prodigal son is a recapitulation of the dynamic between Cain and Abel, because with the return of the prodigal son, you see that his brother is frustrated and upset that the prodigal son is being rewarded for having returned. And he feels like, hey, I've been here this whole time. Why should we celebrate the return of the one who was disobedient and squandered his good fortune? And there's a certain resentment over the flourishing of another. And that resentment is, I think, very similar to the resentment that Cain felt towards Abel and God's acceptance of Abel's offering. And so, while it's easy to focus on the prodigal son and his leaving his father and his returning to his father and his father's response, I think it's also useful to think about his brother's response and to make sure that that stays the main focus too of that story, because there's a lesson there. And I think it's the same lesson that we learn with Cain and Abel. That expectation will lead you to decide what is right and wrong for your own, to take that away from God, to eat from the fruit of the tree, and for you to decide that you are the righteous adjudicator, the one who can decide who is doing good and who is doing wrong and who deserves what. And so, there's just a lesson that it's not for us to know. And if someone is rewarded, then we should rejoice and be glad for them. And otherwise, just stay out of it and mind our lives and wait for our just rewards and be faithful. Have faith that our God is faithful and will reward us as such. So I just wanted to touch on that before we left that story and moved on. So, Genesis chapter 5. This is the written account of Adam's family line. When God created mankind, he made them in the likeness of God. He created them male and female, and blessed them, and named them mankind when they were created. When Adam had lived 130 years, he had a son in his own likeness, in his own image, and he named him Seth. After Seth was born, Adam lived 800 years and had other sons and daughters. Together Adam lived a total of 930 years, and then he died. When Seth had lived 105 years, he became the father of Enosh. After he became the father of Enosh, Seth lived 807 years and had other sons and daughters. Together, Seth lived a total of 912 years, and then he died. When Enosh had lived 90 years, he became the father of Kenan. After he became the father of Kenan, Enosh lived 815 years and had other sons and daughters. Together, Enosh lived a total of 905 years, and then he died. When Kenan had lived 70 years, he became the father of Mahalalel. After he became the father of Mahalalel, Kenan lived 840 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Kenan lived a total of 910 years, and then he died. When Mahalalel had lived 65 years, he became the father of Jared. After he became the father of Jared, Mahalalel lived 830 years and had other sons and daughters. Together, Mahalalel lived a total of 895 years, and then he died. When Jared had lived 162 years, he became the father of Enoch. After he became the father of Enoch, Jared lived 800 years and had other sons and daughters. Together, Jared lived a total of 962 years, and then he died. When Enoch had lived 65 years, he became the father of Methuselah. After he became the father of Methuselah, Enoch walked faithfully with God 300 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Enoch lived 365 years. Enoch walked faithfully with God. Then he was no more, because God took him away. When Methuselah had lived 187 years, he became the father of Lamech. After he became the father of Lamech, Methuselah lived 782 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Methuselah lived a total of 969 years, and then he died. When Lamech had lived 182 years, he had a son. He named him Noah and said, "He will comfort us in the labor and painful toil of our hands caused by the ground the Lord has cursed." After Noah was born, Lamech lived 595 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Lamech lived a total of 777 years, and then he died. After Noah was 500 years old, he became the father of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So, in this passage, this chapter, there's some things that stand out to me here. One, again, we repeat an emphasis on God creating mankind in the likeness of God and creating them male and female, and that they're blessed. Right? That's what this chapter starts with. And then, when we see the description of each of these people, we see that it's divided between their life prior to children and their life after children. So there's something interesting there, that there's two clear epochs in people's lives in this chapter and the way they're described. We have the period until they have children, and then the period after, and then together those two periods are considered to give their total age. And so clearly God makes a distinction here between before we have children and after we have children, as if they're two separate lives, but they're obviously, in one. But it's important because there's a transition here. And I think the Bible, if nothing else, is always emphasizing this transition between one life and another life. And we're going to see as we go through that this crossing, this transition is a motif that never ends in the Bible, and that is central and core to it. Maybe not the core, but it is one of the core principles that we see repeated, recapitulated through this Bible, or through this collection of books, is that there is a change in fortunes, oftentimes a reversal of fortunes, with a crossing over, with a transition that is depicted in a whole bunch of different ways. But in this passage, we see it as being depicted prior to having children and then after having children. And then another thing that really stands out is Enoch. So Enoch walks faithfully with God, and then he was no more because God took him away. So that's an interesting one, right? So he didn't die. He was taken away by God. Now that's interesting because that only happens to a few select people in the Bible. And so it's very interesting, and it's not something I've thought about enough to make too much comment on, but it certainly sounds similar to rapture. And anyway, so we'll leave that there. And then we see Noah at the end of this chapter. And it's interesting with Noah because he is the only one whom a blessing is mentioned about. And so when Lamech had lived 182 years, he had a son. He named him Noah and said, "He will comfort us in the labor and painful toil of our hands, cursed by the ground, the Lord, or caused by the ground, the Lord has cursed." So there's this proclamation, this prophetic statement about Noah. And is it prophetic, or is it the blessing that causes it? And it's only God that blesses, but certainly it was spoken through Lamech here, on over Noah's life. And so there's certainly something there too, that it's mentioned and it's made important enough to include prior to any of the events that occur with Noah. So, okay, I think that's enough on that chapter. So, moving on, Genesis chapter 6, the flood, wickedness in the world. When human beings began to increase in number on the earth, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. Then the Lord said, "My spirit will not contend with humans forever, for they are mortal. Their days will be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown. The Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. The Lord regretted that he had made human beings on earth, and his heart was deeply troubled. So the Lord said, I will wipe from their face, or from the face of the earth, the human race I have created, and with them the animals, the birds, the creatures that move along the ground, for I regret that I have made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. This is the account of Noah and his family. Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, and he walked faithfully with God. Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight and was full of violence. God saw how corrupt the earth had become, for all the people on earth had corrupted their ways. So God said to Noah, I am going to put an end to all people, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. I am surely going to destroy both them and the earth. So make yourself an ark of cypress wood. Make rooms in it and coat it with pitch, inside and out. This is how you are to build it. The ark is to be 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. Make a roof for it, leaving below the roof an opening 1 cubit high all around. Put a door in the side of the ark, and make lower, middle, and upper decks. I am going to bring floodwaters on the earth to destroy all life under the heavens, every creature that has the breath of life in it. Everything on earth will perish, but I will establish my covenant with you, and you will enter the ark, you and your sons, and your wife, and your sons' wives with you. You are to bring into the ark 2 of all living creatures, male and female, to keep them alive with you. 2 of every kind of bird, of every kind of animal, and of every kind of creature that moves along the ground will come to you to be kept alive. You are to take every kind of food that is to be eaten and store it away as food for you and them. Noah did everything just as God commanded him. So this is interesting. So there's a couple things. There's a lot of things that stand out here. So, first, people are wicked all the time. There's nothing in their hearts but wickedness. And so that's disconcerting. And God limits the days of men. He decides that men are living too long. He is frustrated by their wickedness and having to put up with them. So he says they will only live for 120 years. And we have this intermarrying of the sons of God and the daughters of humans. And so this is a really interesting one because this describes the connectedness and interplay between the realm of God and heaven and of earth and of human beings and of those who inhabit heaven, and a coming down from heaven to earth of those who inhabit heaven. Or so, at first glance, that's what it seems to me. Now, this isn't something I've thought too much about, but it certainly is something that is, okay, sorry about that. I had a issue with memory there. So, as I was saying, this isn't something I thought too much about, and it's definitely something I would have to think more about. It's obviously important. But again, I'll think about it. And if there's anything that comes to mind, I'll tell you guys tomorrow. But moving on from the Nephilim, let's see, what else do we have here? We see that God decides he's going to kill everything. He says, I'm going to wipe away human beings from the face of the earth, right? And with them the animals, the birds, the creatures, everything. He regrets that he has made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. Now, this is interesting because it goes on to say that Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, and he walked faithfully with God. So, again, we see this walking faithfully with God. Now, I think we've heard this 3 times up until this point in Genesis. So, Adam walked with God. Then Enoch walked with God. And now Noah walks with God. And now Adam and Enoch, who walked faithfully with God, both of them didn't die. They were taken by God back in that special kind of way that is reserved for those who walked faithfully with God. And so let's see if that happens with Noah. Now, I don't remember this story well enough to know, but I don't think it does. I think Noah dies, but we'll see. Anyway, it's clear that there's something special about Noah and his relationship with God that we only see recapitulated a couple times. So, regardless of that, Noah is found to be blameless. God gives him instructions for the ark and how to survive the flood and what to bring, how to make, what to put on the ark, all of that. And so God is giving Noah instructions here in his salvation. And he's also foreshadowing the salvation of us with Christ. In that he's wiping out, eradicating the wicked, right? And when Christ comes, Paul describes it as, he who is without sin became sin for us and was, sacrificed on the cross. Now, I don't remember the exact verse, but we see that Jesus becomes the carrier of the wickedness in the world, of the sin in the world, and is sacrificed instead of the world later on, because God, we'll go on. So we see that there's this transition again, right? And it's going to be dependent on Noah's obedience that he be saved. God has told him what's going to happen. He's given him instructions for how to save himself. But if Noah doesn't follow those instructions, then does God save Noah? I don't think so. I don't think he would. But we know that God knows Noah will follow him, because it says that Noah walked faithfully with God. And so God already has established that Noah is obedient before he gives him these instructions and tells him how to save himself. So, yes, it's up to Noah's obedience, but God's already established Noah's obedience beforehand. And I'm curious, and I just wonder if it has anything to do with that blessing that was spoken over Noah, and whether it was a blessing or just a prophecy. But regardless, Noah's going to be the man for the job. So let's read a third chapter today, and we've got a lot of this book to get through, and 2 chapters a day might not do it. The Lord then said to Noah, "Go into the ark, you and your whole family, because I have found you righteous in this generation. Take with you 7 pairs of every kind of clean animal, a male and its mate, and 1 pair of every kind of unclean animal, a male and its mate, and also 7 pairs of every kind of bird, male and female, to keep their various kinds alive throughout the earth. 7 days from now, I will send rain on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights, and I will wipe from the face of the earth every living creature I have made. And Noah did all that the Lord commanded him. Noah was 600 years old when the floodwaters came on the earth. And Noah and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives entered the ark to escape the waters of the flood. Pairs of clean and unclean animals, of birds and all the creatures that move along the ground, male and female, came to Noah and entered the ark as God had commanded Noah. And after 7 days, the floodwaters came on the earth. After the 7 days, the floodwaters came on the earth. In the 600th year of Noah's life, on the 7th day of the 2nd month, on that day all the springs of the great deep burst forth, and the floodgates of the heavens were open, and rain fell on the earth 40 days and 40 nights. On that very day Noah and his sons Shem, Ham, and Japheth, together with his wife and the wives of his 3 sons, entered the ark. They had with them every wild animal according to its kind, all livestock according to their kinds, every creature that moves along the ground according to its kind, and every bird according to its kind, everything with wings. Pairs of all creatures that had the breath of life in them came to Noah and entered the ark. The animals going in were male and female of every living thing, as God had commanded Noah. Then the Lord shut him in. For 40 days the flood kept coming on the earth, and as the waters increased, they lifted the ark high above the earth. The waters rose and increased greatly on the earth, and the ark floated on the surface of the water. They rose greatly on the earth, and all the high mountains under the entire heavens were covered. The waters rose and covered the mountains to a depth of more than 15 cubits. Every living thing that moved on the land perished, birds, livestock, wild animals, all the creatures that swarm over the earth, and all mankind. Everything on dry land had the breath of life in its nostrils. That had the breath of life in its nostrils died. Every living thing on the face of the earth was wiped out. People and animals and the creatures that move along the ground and the birds were wiped from the earth. Only Noah was left, and those with him in the ark. The waters flooded the earth for 150 days. That's a long time. So, something that struck me here, and this is interesting. So, I should have mentioned this in chapter 6 chapter 5. We first started reading. So, in the Bible, we see at the beginning in the creation that God rests on the 7th day, and the 7th day represents completion. So then we see that 7 becomes this symbol of an ending throughout the Bible in all these different places. So the 7th day, God rests. One period is done, the period of creation and God's work, and now God is resting. And a new epoch has begun. Then we see here that Lamech, in chapter 5, he lived a total of 777 years, right? This is Noah's father. Now, 777 years, that represents a completion as well. So the 7 motif comes up. So we know that one epoch is now ending again. So the first epoch ended with the finishing of creation by God and his rest. And now we have a new epoch that is ending, which is the days of old, with the um, the people who God allowed to live well into the hundreds of years. And this period of time when people were a different kind of people and closer with God in certain ways. So we know that with the end of Lamech, one period has ended. That period marked by this 777 years of Lamech. And now we have Noah, and Noah's going to bring us into the next period, right? And then we see that, again, this 7 motif is repeated when the world starts to flood. And the flood, right, starts on the 7th chapter. Again, an ending. So transition from one period into the next. So the waters come, and how many days does it take for the waters to create a flood? As the animals and everything are coming into the ark, well, it takes 7 days, right? So again, this motif, 7 days. And then the flood starts. Yep. And it's the 7th verse of the 7th chapter that Noah and his sons and his wives and his sons' wives enter the ark to escape the waters of the flood. So, anyway, I'm just trying to make a point, not trying to read too much into the symbolism here, but to make a point to whomever might listen to this, to look for 7s in the Bible as a symbol of completion, because it generally is going to mark a change, a transition from one epoch into the next. And you'll see that repeated again and again throughout the Bible. And so it's worth mentioning, because when you see that come up, it's a good point to sit and think, what has changed? What is coming now and what is going away? Because that helps you see these transitions and where God is working and changing the world. So I hope that's helpful to you. So that said, and that was already, like I said, should have been mentioned at chapter 5, but it really kind of made more sense to mention it here too after we got to the 7th chapter for obvious reasons. So thinking about this water, and also thinking about this back here, we see, take with you 7 pairs of every kind of clean animal, a male and its mate, and 1 pair of every kind of unclean animal, a male and its mate. And this is kind of interesting to me because I don't remember God mentioning what animals were unclean. And I might have just forgotten it. It might have been in the 1st or 2nd chapter, somewhere around the fall. Let's see. But as far as I can see right now, I don't see where God has told them that certain animals are unclean. Other than the serpent, of course. And so it may be that that is what is being spoken of here when he talks about the 7 pairs of clean animals and the 1 pair of the unclean animals. But I couldn't tell you. And so clearly God has conveyed to others what is to be considered clean and unclean. And I'm not sure when that happened or how, why, but that's okay. There may be some explanation or explication later in the Bible that I'm just not aware of. So, that said, looking at the rest of this chapter, they entered the ark, and then it was 7 days after that the floodwaters came. Sorry, I think I said it preceded them entering the ark. And it rained on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. This is another number motif that we're going to see a lot. It says 40 days and 40 nights is going to be the same number of days that Moses is on the mountain. And it's going to be the same number of days that Jesus is tempted in the wilderness, or is fasting in the wilderness before being tempted. And so there's something very important about this 40 days and 40 nights as well, and what that might represent. I'm not certain of yet, nor am I ever really certain of anything in the Bible. I mean, I guess we get to find out one day, but with all that said, I don't know that I have that much more to say, because I don't know how to really make sense of the symbolism of the different types of animals and such, and if there is any, or if it's just meant to be what it is. And so we know that the earth was flooded for 150 days. And we're going to see in the next chapter that God remembered Noah. And so that's interesting too, because it also sounds like if we have to explicitly say that God remembered, then he may have forgotten, but God doesn't forget. So maybe that's just to calm the reader. I don't know. We'll find out tomorrow. Anyway, thank you for joining me this morning, and I hope you have a blessed day.